So our next topic in the genetics is some more terms here. We have test cross. And test cross is something that, if you've worked on those worksheets, you've probably seen it a little bit, but it wasn't called this, I don't think. This is where we cross an individual of unknown genotype with a recessive individual to determine the unknown by studying the offspring. And Mendel did this a lot in trying to figure out what was recessive and what was dominant because he didn't know. So he did lots and lots of test cross in those 10,000 or more, um, probably tens of thousands of pea plants that he did. So we don't actually have to do test crosses as much nowadays because we can just map a genome, and it's not a big deal. But historically, and not that many years ago, because genome mapping was either unknown or even when it was first available, it was very expensive. So people still were doing test crosses because of the expense of a map. But now you don't even have to map the entire genome to find out the information, of course, that you need. You can just target areas. But I want to talk to you about the process because it's very important in the understanding how Mendel and other genetic pioneers learned what they did. I'm going to use an example of how this was used in cattle breeding when I was a child. Okay, um, so there is. I'm going to use the example I'm most familiar with. That's Limousin cattle and Black Angus cattle. So um, with Black Angus, here's a little history of livestock and marketing and animal breeding. Limousin beef is known to be very lean. Its fat is on the outside. It's easily cut off. So there is a market demand for lean meat in certain market niches, and the Limousin is one of the lean beef cattle that fill that niche. Um, so my parents would sell to a particular buyer that was buying for that type of market. An example of that is Lara's Lean Beef is one company that did that. Um, they did not want to purchase any animals that were black in color because that would possibly indicate they had Black Angus. Now, Black Angus is a totally different type of meat, and it is well known for its marbling. It is desirable uh, by most buyers on the standard beef market because they want to guarantee that that marbling is in there. What marbling means is that the muscle striations have fat distributed in between those fibers of the muscle. Okay. What that does is when you cook a steak, it makes that fat melts while the meat cooks. It keeps it juicy, it keeps it tender, okay, because that moisture is good. If you genetically move all that fat or most of that fat to the outside of the muscle where it's then mostly cut off, then when that meat cooks, it's dry. So you've got to cook it differently. Usually you're adding some type of oil, but again, the idea is to try to keep it low fat, right? So different markets, different demands. So my parents used to do Black Angus. Used to raise Black Angus, but what happened was they were in kind of the early days of the Black Angus when it was still Aberdeen Angus, and it was cattle imported from Scotland. The registry would not allow any type of animal outside of what was brought over from Scotland to be included or descended thereof. So the breed became inbred. And what happened was they got smaller, shorter legs, smaller bodies. They ate as much as the larger animals pretty much. And my parents were having a hard time justifying expensive feed for the animal when they were looking at possibly being able to buy a larger breed, feed them about the same, and you sell your animals on cents per pound. Okay, cents per pound. So if the animal's bigger, weighs more, you're going to make more money, and that's why they left the Angus originally. Now, not too long after they left the breed, the uh, North American Angus broke with the Scottish Aberdeen Angus registry, made their own registry, brought in some new blood, and fixed the problem. But my parents had already committed to Limousin at that point. So um, what they noticed with the Limousin were they have big calves with big hips. And those hips get stuck sometimes when the cow is birthing the calf. Okay, not a pleasant thing. It's not a pleasant thing. That can cause usually the death of the calf for sure, sometimes the death of the cow. So you cannot just lose your potential animal for sale, but also your animal that you have invested money in for producing. So it was a problem, and it usually occurred mostly with the cows who were having heifers, as we call them, cows who are having their first time calf. Angus are known for having small calves that grow fast. So my dad solved the problem by going out and buying an Angus bull and putting them with the first time calving cows to have small calves. Okay. Because then after that first calf, it didn't usually seem to be a problem. Now, that caused us a problem, though, in selling our animals because Lars Lean Beef didn't want to buy any animals that were black in color. Okay. Um, so we couldn't sell those animals. But that's great because we sold them on the commercial market and they were black in color. They brought more on the commercial market, commercial slaughter market, than red animals did. Okay, so red animals kind of had to be sold to to the lean beef people, and the black animals could be sold for a better price on the commercial market. Problem is, if you're taking a black Angus bull that is heterozygous, because there are red Angus, okay, so they can carry black or red trait with red animals, then you've got 50% of those first calf offspring are going to wind up being red and 50% going to be black. Well, the buyer who we were selling our limousine to knew what we were doing with those first calf heifers and didn't want any part of anything that might have Angus in it because that was going to possibly put marbling into the meat, even if they were red in color. So what Dad had to do was trying to make sure that that first batch of calves were all black in color. And how you do that, let me draw a Punnett square out here. Well, okay, let me show you this right here. We're going to use B for capital B for black color, okay? And we're going to use little b, I'll put it over here, for red or yellow. In cattle, it's called red or yellow, okay? And white's a totally different thing. White's, yeah, we're going to, yeah, don't talk about that. Okay, that's actually talked about later in your worksheet when you get to that. Okay, so if you do this, then the black Angus bull that's homozygous dominant can only give a dominant allele in color, okay, excuse me, to the offspring, and the red or yellow cow can only give a recessive. And all offspring, 100%, are going to be heterozygous. So that's just like our seed shape example earlier on. Okay, however, here's the problem. If your bull is heterozygous, okay, let me draw the Punnett square for that. Okay, here's one of those where for your worksheet, they'd stop there and this bottom layer wouldn't be here at all because it's just going to duplicate what's on top here. There we go. Learning to draw with the pen. Okay. So 50% of the offspring, there's a chance every calf, this is per calf basically, okay, has a 50% chance of being um, heterozygous or homozygous recessive. So this one, this allele combination would give a black calf and this would give a red calf. What you uh, also, if all of the cows are this and your bull is this, then that actually can represent the entire population with 50% of the population of the offspring, most likely close to 50% would be black and 50% would be red. Okay, which means that 50% of your calves you can take and sell at the commercial market for a good price, and the other 50% aren't going to bring as good of money, and you can't sell them to the niche market where you're getting a premium from being lean beef because they're not. Maybe they've got this marbling, you know, possibly trait from the bull that they're inheriting. So what you want to do is you want to guarantee that the second allele here is also a dominant allele, and so you want to know you've got a heterozygous um, I mean, you want to know that you've got a homozygous dominant bull and not heterozygous. And the only way you can do that, so what you've got, I mean, well, before gene mapping. Okay. All right. Uh, this is what you've got. You've got this unknown here. So what you do is you take that animal that's of unknown and cross with a number of cows. So you could take an entire little herd of red or yellow cows, and cross with the bull that's black, but you don't know what the other allele is. And if you do this with, say, 20 or 30 cows, and you get 20 or 30 black calves, however, I mean, 20, 20. If you get all calves are black, then you can say with quite a bit of confidence that this is a dominant allele here. You can never be 100% dominant because, science and statistics. Okay. The problem is that if you've got 30 cows, you get 30 calves. Usually there's one cow or two that doesn't actually have a calf. But anyway, if you, let's be, ideal situation, 30 cows, 30 calves, and one of them is red, then, oh, come on, give it to me there. Yeah, the bull's heterozygous. Just one is all it takes to show that he can pass that allele on. And that's the problem with why you can never be 100% certain that he's not. You can just be pretty sure that he's homozygous dominant if there aren't any uh, red calves born. Is because toss a coin 10, 12, 13, 20 times in a row. Can you come up with heads 20 times in a row? Sure you can. It's not likely to happen, but it can happen. I used to have students when I taught this, and actually did that in my sixth or seventh grade class when I taught middle school. And we would kind of take a day and just toss quarters and record what you tossed. And people could get runs of 20, 25 of either heads or tails in a row. Okay. And so that can happen in real life too. All right. I mean, with real animals and plants, where it just so happens that this allele gets passed on all the time, but that one's still there. So that's why you can never be 100% certain of this prior to gene mapping. But the test cross could give us a good idea. And so this is a test cross. And we used to do it. They did it with the Angus bulls because they would sell them on this bull is 90%, 95%, 98%, whatever certain with however many cattle they bred that bull too to determine the offspring. Um, so that percent certain that he was homozygous dominant, and so my dad would be looking for the higher percentage certainty. They did do it with dogs, trying to determine whether an animal had hip dysplasia, could pass hip dysplasia on. They didn't actually have it. Ones that actually exhibited it were not allowed to breed, and in most of the breeds, most of the AKC breeds. But if you um, you didn't have it, they still ran statistics on the animals to see, if there was a chance of passing it on. Of course, once one puppy born with it, then that meant that they had the ability to pass it on. So therefore, that animal would not be bred anymore after that, at least not by an ethical breeder. So um, there's some other deformities and undesirable traits in animals that this test cross was used to determine whether the offspring could get it or not as well. So it's very useful. And like I said, now we just do genetic tests. They've got um, a test that looks for the actual gene code. Okay, you don't have to map the whole genome. You just look for that particular sequence in the genome, and it'll tag it, and it's there, it's not there, and just the more we learn, the more we're able to do.